Today's lesson is on using semicolons and colons, and it will cover CS exercise number 101. Colons are used in 4 different cases. So the first place where you can use a colon is when you're introducing a list of items, but only if the introduction to that list is an independent clause. In this example, the following items are found on the football field: a jacket, a pair of track shoes, and a black cap. The introduction that comes before the following items are found on the football field. That could be a sentence on its own, so it is an independent clause, which is why we follow it with a colon. If it was a dependent clause, like there are a, or I found a, like it's not its own sentence, so it wouldn't have a colon. After greetings in a business letter is the second place that you could use a colon. So the lesson we just did on friendly letters is different. This is a business letter. So in a business letter, you might say, "Dear Miss Campbell," and then you would include a colon afterwards. In a friendly letter, we just use a comma. The third place that we use colons is probably very natural to you already. We use it between hours and minutes when we're writing time. So if you're going to say it's 3:15 a.m., we put that colon in between the 3 and the 15. The final place that we use them will be one of the trickier ones. We use them between 2 independent clauses. So remember, independent clauses could be their own sentence, but only when the second clause explains the first. So green plants use photosynthesis. They use light to synthesize carbohydrates from carbon dioxide and water. Both of those clauses could be sentences on their own, but the second one is explaining what photosynthesis is, which is that first sentence. So that's why we use a colon in between them. A semicolon separates related sentence parts, and it's kind of the midpoint between a comma and a period. So it's a more definite break than a comma, but it's also less abrupt than a period. So they can be used in 3 different situations. The first case is when you're separating items in a series or a list if an item in the series contains a comma. So I know that might sound a little bit confusing, but here's the example. St. John, New Brunswick, Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, and Halifax, Nova Scotia are the capital cities of the Maritimes. So we already learned that we need to separate our cities and our provinces with a comma, but it would be very confusing for us to go St. John, comma, New Brunswick, comma, because that's the end of that item in the list, right? So this creates a more definite break by using a semicolon instead of a comma to separate list items. The second place you can use a semicolon is when joining clauses in a compound sentence without a coordinating conjunction. So the sentence they give us, Robin has finished mowing her lawn, Sarah has just started mowing hers. Instead of the semicolon, you could have said, Robin has finished mowing her lawn, but Sarah has just started mowing hers, or and. But when we combine these without that coordinating conjunction, we replace that with the semicolon in the middle. The final case when you can use a semicolon is when you're joining 2 independent clauses if the second begins with a transition word. So some of the transition words we learned about recently were however, therefore, furthermore, then, and consequently. So we would like to go to the ball game. Independent clause. We weren't able to get tickets. Independent clause. We can combine these with the transition word however. We would like to go to the ball game, however, we weren't able to get tickets. And however needs to have a semicolon before it. It also needs to have a comma after it because it is kind of in between, that transition between 2 independent clauses. Part A will give you 6 sentences, and they ask you to add colons to the sentences where they are needed. So remember to look back at the top of your page or in this video to see the 4 cases when you need to use colons in a sentence. Part B will give you 12 sentences that need semicolons. So your job is to read them and figure out Which of the three cases is this applying to, and do you need to include some semicolons? Part C is not going to tell you whether it needs a semicolon or a colon. It might be both. It might be one or the other. So there's 6 more questions, 6 sentences. You have to decide, do I need colons, do I need semicolons, and put them into the correct places. On your Google form, I will have 1 question from part A, 1 from part B, 1 from part C. You're going to retype the sentence, putting in the correct colons and semicolons where they are applicable. And then you will get an answer key tomorrow so that you can go through and take another look through your answers to see how you did. And if you need any help, feel free to reach out to me.